Whenever you're ready, Josh.
Fantastic. All right, let me get my hands off the table. I find that when I start moving too much, Brandon, you can hear the pounding of me. It's funny because over here it's just me talking, right? But then when I listen back to the recording, it sounds like I'm like in my head at least, it sounds like I'm banging on the table.
Well, you're an expressive guy, Josh.
I
think
am.
maybe it is for you to be emphatic. Maybe we need more banging in the podcast space.
Am I too emotional or am I not emotional enough, Brandon? That's the question for me to know and our listeners to find out. But let's jump right in. Let's do a hard, proper set here. I like that my hat, because of this microphone, makes it look like I'm wearing this like kind of sideways sort of 80s style. I don't really know.
Cool J over here.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hail cheaters. Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. It is Sunday evening, fall or autumn, as they say in other parts of the country. We all say fall here, though, Brandon, because the leaves fall from the trees. I guess that's where fall comes from. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
Insert easy joke about falling overall rank. I feel like this is the story every weekend for me. It's green arrow on Saturday, red arrow on Sunday. I feel like I want it to be the opposite. If somebody comes into a room, Josh, and says, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news, which do you want first? Where are you at on that?
I want the bad news first, of course. You want to end. You don't want to end on a low note. I do like that. Good news, or what did you say? Green arrow Saturday, red arrow Sunday.
That's
Is that
right.
what you said?
Yeah.
That look like, I don't know how many more FPL t-shirts the world needs, but that's not a bad slogan for a t-shirt. You can have little arrows on there and stuff.
Yeah, right. How about green? Every day is a green arrow. That sounds like a Sheryl Crow song, honestly. I mean, how about you? I feel like we were on the same trajectory in terms of Saturday versus Sunday.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like we're sort of deepening a theme, Brandon, that we've been talking about recently, which is that the fantasy is a window into enjoying the Premier League more, right? And obviously, as a game, it's fun. I enjoy the game. If I didn't enjoy the game, I wouldn't play. But what sort of makes it, I think, more deeply fulfilling than just playing like a tabletop game or something like that, right? Is you sort of get to also watch all of these matches. And I felt like there was a lot of drama this weekend, right? A lot of red card drama. I would say in terms of my actual overall squad, it was one of those, it felt like nothing happened today that was good for me, but nothing bad either, right? I mean, Pedro, it would have been nice if he got more than 1 point. He did. He did get Morgan Gibbs White sent off, which maybe that helped me a little bit. Like there's a handful of owners out there, right? I don't really know. There was, by the way, I like the new Pedro's new hair. I think looks cool. I'm into it. I like
strikes a great figure
on
the pitch. Pedro. He's ready for the next level for sure with that look.
That's true. That is a next level look. It's like Marcelo or something like that. I like that. It's a cool style. I'm a fan. But I had a kind of sneaky good Saturday, and it was really the defense that did it for me. You and I both had Henderson, which really came through, and I got 11 from Trent, and then getting the very late goal from Konsa too, and that is one of the sweetest. You talk about like bad news and good news. The early goal conceded, followed by the 89th minute game-winning goal. That is a beautiful moment, because you just kind of are done, right? Like when a center back loses a clean sheet 5 minutes in, like I realize there's like a 1 in 15 chance or something, right? That like something good is going to happen, but you just don't really, at that point, you're not really banking on it, right? It's just
the fun thing about defenders in fantasy is sweating the clean sheet, and the longer the sweat goes, the more fun it is. And when the clean sheet gets wiped within, the first 15 minutes, as you said, takes a lot of the fun out of it. I mean, to me, the ultimate is clean sheet wipes, and then Konsa immediately scores that goal, and then you've got one over on all the Dean owners. R.I.P. Dean owners, by the way, and the Martinez and Pau Torres owners. But Aston Villa went on quite a journey this weekend, I think, going from are these guys going to like Newcastle it this season? Like Newcastle last season, just their squad got stretched through the Champions League, too many injuries, and it just gassed them and sent them mid-table. And at the end of that match against Wolves, suddenly you're like, okay, Villa feel as strong as always from the defense to the attack.
And I think they've sort of a little bit kind of Arsenal style. It feels like they brought in they're developing talent, right? And in Morgan Rogers and Duran and I don't know, Jalen Ramsey, right? Like there's a handful of young player, even Konsa to a degree, right? Like it feels like they're sort of like a lot of younger players have been stepping up over the last 12 months or so. And I think that's really what allows you to make up that difference in depth. I mean, some clubs like Brighton, I suppose, are really good at, just finding, talented diamonds in the rough all the time, but that's an incredibly high risk strategy, right? Way better if you can pull it off to develop young players, right? Because obviously they're cheaper, and then you can also still buy, right? You can still bring in players too, and so it does feel like they might have enough depth to survive. It does feel like I'm surprised that they've been a little. I don't really know what they're. I'd actually be curious. I'm going to go to FB Ref real quick here, Brandon, and I'm curious what their actual defensive numbers look like so far in the season. I'd be curious if they are. It feels like they have. I mean, they've conceded 7 goals, which does feel a little high for them, compared to last season.
No clean sheets this season.
Yeah, their X goals
in
against
the Premier League, at least,
is 5. So they're actually 6th overall in terms of like goals, like the goals you'd expect to concede. So maybe they've been a little unlucky. I mean, obviously even the Wolves goal today was like a belter, right? Like not an easy goal to defend. So, a small sample too. I mean, we've seen this before with Man City, where first 10, 15 weeks of the season, they seem a little shaky defensively. And then the final 10 weeks, it's just impossible to score a goal on them.
Have we reached a new level of Man City defensive instability this season? It just feels like it's all completely out the window. And now, based on like the last 45 minutes of that Arsenal match, the defense is the only form of attack that Man City have.
Well,
let's just have Ruben Diaz take shots from 30 yards out.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it, because this is certainly FPL relevant. Devastating match. And I'm impressed that there are people out there, Arsenal supporters, who can take a positive from that match. Because I mean, yes, like there are positives. Of course there are positives, but they're outweighed by the gigantic negative, right? It's like if you add up +1 6 times, you get +6, and then you have a -33 at the end of the match that turns it into a -27 or whatever.
What is that a calculation of?
Well, just like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, my metaphor here, but basically the conceding that goal and dropping 2 points late is devastating for their title chances.
Yeah. I mean, the table points for sure.
Yeah, and
every
being in the 9th
when you're going against Man City, right?
Absolutely. Like that would have been a huge decision for them. And so, and so I just think it's what it was the 9th minute of 8th minute of extra time. I was really surprised, and I'm probably not super objective here, because I like all the players on Man City, but I don't. Whatever. Like, I mean, basically, I'm an Arsenal supporter, and I thought that Trossard decision was kind of insane. And I like Michael Oliver. Like, I actually think that Mike Oliver is one of the better referees in the Premier League. I know not everyone agrees with me on that, but like, I think he's fine. And it felt like the kind of decision where like a guy goes for the ball and he puts his shoulder in. I just feel like that's rarely a yellow card, right? And then when you add in the context of it's going to now effectively ruin the match, right?
Do we have certainty if the yellow card was for the shoulder barge or for kicking the ball away after the whistle was gone?
Oh, interesting. I thought it was the shoulder barge, but interesting. Maybe you think it was like another kind of.
I believe Trossard ends up blasting the ball after the follow is whistled, and then it becomes another Declan Rice thing.
Yeah,
and if that's the case, then it's just like madness that Arsenal are going to get done by the same time wasting call in the first half, no less. Like 2 out of 5 matches, which is crazy.
No, it's 4 points dropped on these decisions.
I mean,
it's insane.
To a degree, it's sort of just like I do not care for blame the referee conversations.
Neither do I. And I don't think that's I don't think you and I do blame the I mean, yeah, VAR. If we're counting VAR as the referee,
well, VAR just
that's a
sucks.
difference.
It's not fun, and it detracts from everyone's enjoyment of the game. Whether they get the call wrong or right is a whole other conversation. I was talking with our friend Aaron on the Discord today, and we had a good idea. With all this like kicking the ball away after the whistle's blown. We're using Hawkeye technology on the goal line, right? And they're looking at Hawkeye for assisted offside calls. Let's bring more tennis sort of inventions into the game. And that goes for ball boys. In tennis, you've got very active ball boys just like running across the court, whatever is needed. And I think that we could do away with time wasting if we just had ball boys just like perpetually running around the pitch, supplying balls whenever needed. And then on top of that, I think if you put Michael Oliver in like a giant chair at the midfield point, like maybe 80 feet tall,
right? You can just watch everything from up there.
Great. Yeah,
that's interesting. That's not bad. I don't hate that. Yeah, I mean, and we're supposed to get semi-automated. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with time wasting, but we're supposed to get semi-automated offside at some point, right? They're supposed to have at the beginning of the season, and then it wasn't ready. VAR has like mercifully not been a huge issue so far, right? I mean, I don't think VAR can do anything about like the yellow card situation, which like I don't think I mean, I don't think that's reviewable. Maybe I guess it is because it's like a physical act or whatever. But either way, right? I mean, he wasn't.
A yellow card you can't review on. So it
turns into a red. Does it?
Still
not?
Can't. If it's a second yellow, you still can't review it on VAR. Okay. Yeah. The comments in the chat support it was a time wasting violation, and I just so you kind of can't have it both ways. Like the laws are the laws. You want them enforced when you want them enforced. You don't want them enforced when it's like a special situation. Granted, that the match was shaping up with the Haaland goal and then the incredible Calafiori goal.
Yeah.
Wow, this is going to be like an incredible match for the ages. And then what you get is a second half that's like this insanely low block by Arsenal. That said, I still found it like wildly entertaining to see how impossible Arsenal made it for Manchester City. Haaland couldn't touch the ball. I couldn't wrap my head around how no City players seemed willing to take on their defender off the dribble. Like, can any of these City guys beat somebody on the dribble?
It's a weird squad right now. It feels totally unfresh, right? Like it feels like, Bernardo Silva blew a kind of biggest chance early on in the match too. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it was tense. I wouldn't say it was entertaining exactly, although maybe it's entertaining as a neutral. It's like you just kind of want to see both teams go for it. And I just don't know that you necessarily needed to call it there. And I honestly just don't. I mean, this to me is like it's like a version of the VAR debate, which is like, should context ever matter in this stuff, or is it just like pure rules and like, rules enforce the fun, sort of like whatever. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, I just don't think he needed to blow, or I don't think he needed to give a yellow there. I mean, it kind of, that feels like a little bit of just excessive refereeing, like over refereeing.
Sure.
I think
Michael Oliver had like extreme cop energy in the match today.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what these guys are, right? These guys are like failed cops who like turn into these Premier League, right? Why else would anybody do this miserable job, right? Yeah. So anyway, this is stuff that'll all get covered on non-fantasy pods as well. But it did have some very big implications, certainly. Saka was taken off at halftime. The Ben White thing, there was a quote from Arteta afterwards that said it was somewhat enforced, which implies that there was a little bit of a fitness issue with White. Although I do wonder if we could see some more rotation in general, because it does seem like Arsenal have more depth now, especially if you can play Timber and Calafiori together, which I kind of just didn't see that coming. Maybe because Ben White was such a lock last season on that right wing spot, right back spot. But if you can play those two, and I mean, Calafiori looked great, right? I mean, an amazing goal.
Yeah. Decent defensively as well.
Yeah, exactly. So they're just a really solid team, and it would have been really cool if they had been able to get level on points with Man City. And so I'm sort of seeing everything through the filter of that a little bit. In terms of fantasy, I mean, Haaland again ended up with 3 bonus. Nick the third bonus point late, and I mean, and also I mean, Gabriel might be the single best scoring, like the center back in the Premier League who has inherited the John Terry mantle of most effective center back on set pieces, right? Like he's just insanely dangerous. And the way he sort of runs up now to them, right? I mean, maybe he's always done this, but like it feels like he was basically at like the touchline, right? Or not the touchline, but the 18-yard box,
yeah.
And he like runs in. And it's just very hard to defend, right? You can sort of see Kyle Walker just get like kind of nothing he can do, really.
You gotta try. It was so insipid from Man City. First of all, you've got Doku marking Gabriel on the first corner kick, which looked okay, cool. Like, did anyone discuss this at City's training this week? And then the way how easily Arsenal boxed Ederson in when Gabriel scored it. Ederson really didn't put up any fight whatsoever, and Kyle Walker, you know what's going to happen. Like, I just really don't understand it. But credit to Bukayo Saka, who puts that corner every single time on a sixpence at the back post for Gabriel. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And a really, it's a really well positioned to the extent that, I mean, I think like when you watch, you're like, how could he like even know where he was aiming that? Because they go so fast. But I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he, like, I mean, just an unblockable. Anyway, right. So a great corner. Great. So now we are now at 5 attacking returns in 5 for Saka, even though he was taken off at halftime. So did we learn anything that makes we feel, did anything change in terms of Arsenal? A lot of people are wild carding going into game week 6, targeting Arsenal. Arsenal have a trio of excellent fixtures, right? Kicks off in game week 6 with Leicester at home. And then followed by Southampton at home. And I think you could even throw Bournemouth away in game week 3 in there. But certainly Leicester and Southampton in 6 and 7 are terrific fixtures. At the moment, I only have one Arsenal player, and that's a player that's one of the least exciting players you could have in Saliba, right? I mean, 2 or 6 points, maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 if they, don't score too many goals.
Lucky 7.
Lucky 7. Yeah, which is fine. I sort of, the thing is, I wouldn't have started Gabriel today even if I had him. I would have benched him. So I'm not going to play the like should have, would have, game. I will play that with Jota and Luis Diaz, because that one was a real 50-50 call. And wow, like that is like a sliding doors moment. But just to stick with Arsenal for a second. So I have just the one Arsenal player. I think you do as well, right? Because you dropped Saka for Salah going into game week 5, right?
Yeah, and I've already made my transfer for game week 6. Okay. I think my biggest problem the last couple of weeks has been Newcastle, and the faith I have put in Gordon and Isak has not been repaid.
Yeah.
And the price drops, they are coming, especially for Isak.
Yep.
And what works seamlessly for my team is Isak to Havertz. I've done that. So now I have Saliba and Havertz. Yes, sir. Havertz's position is definitely impacted by the Odegaard injury. He's kind of been in like possessional rotation with whether it's Jesus or Trossard in the middle, but still, like, depending on if Arsenal have the ball or not, Havertz is either doing the hold-up play or is making attacking runs. I still feel like there's attacking points to be gotten from this man, especially with these fixtures turning. And Arsenal are definitely coming back with a vengeance. They will score goals. I think Havertz is a great pick for certain. I like him for me because it works in my setup. Ideally, I think you'd have to rate Saka as number one attacking asset for Arsenal right now. But number one is Arsenal defense. Like, if you learn anything from this Man City match or from their Champions League performance, it is like, no matter what the personnel is, they are set up to really limit goal scoring chances. Raya, for one, is on another planet. and then Gabriel and Saliba. I think a double up in defense and one Arsenal attack feels great going into this fixture turn.
Yeah. Saka, Gabriel,
Raya.
So, yeah, I mean that's just too much for a keeper for me. But like, yeah, I think if you're willing to spend more than 4.5 on a keeper, then I think Raya is a good pick. I do think I think you could go Gabriel, Saliba. Saka,
Raya has more points than Trent Alexander-Arnold right now.
Yeah, I mean he's at an incredible start to the season, but I just am not going to spend 5.6 on a keeper. Like it's I mean, yeah, certainly like it's remarkable how well he's done at the moment, but I just don't see him keeping it up. I mean, it's not like traditionally he's been like, I mean, I guess I don't know, when he was at Brentford, he was an excellent keeper option. I don't know, it just, this is like, I don't want to have the philosophical debate about whether it's worth spending almost 6 million on a keeper or not. It's not something I want to do, and I don't recommend it, but I do understand that it's like a viable option. That's basically like where I come down. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah. So yeah, I think let's move on to, we'll talk more obviously in a bit about the about wild carding, because there's a bunch of questions about wild carding. But I thought the Liverpool match was interesting in a lot of ways. We got no Jota, so that was fun. He is back to being a totally annoying, borderline worthless fantasy asset.
Wow. Here we go.
And
let the hate flow through you,
it's just he's always injured or something. There's always something going on with him, or he's missing chances, or he's not a reliable like fixture for the team. And it's just it's just the same as it ever was, right? And now we all of us who went Jota have to watch Luis Diaz look like the greatest left wing in the world. Like
he looks amazing.
He looks amazing. And he got 2 goals, could have had a hat trick, and he looks fantastic.
What a curveball it was, though. Coming out of the Champions League fixture midweek, everyone thinks Gakpo.
Right.
Slots out here talking about how good Gakpo looks. He wanted to play him out of the international break, has an incredible match in the Champions League. Lo and behold, it is Darwin Nunez who gets the start. The weekend.
Which scores an amazing goal too.
Yeah. I don't know if that's just like straight up disrespect for Wolves or what, but I think what we learned there is, and then on the back of the performance as well, Luis Diaz is just like the man.
Yeah. The Darwin thing, by the way, is hilarious because he's so beloved by like underlying stats because he takes so many shots in the box, and even though he misses, the vast majority of them, and then he scores his best goals as a Liverpool player with an outside the box shot that probably has a 5%, right? Like I don't know what the XG was on that shot,
as good as Vincent Kompany.
Yeah, but I love you bringing up that Kompany goal like every week now. It's like there should be a new theme: is just find a way to work the Kompany goal into the.
Yeah, it's I don't know if I guess it was post Barclays era, but all the Barclays man discussion. You got to put Kompany up.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Barclays. He has a Barclays man for sure. So what do you do now with Jota? I mean, you still have him in your squad, right?
No, I moved.
Oh, you moved
Jota.
him. That's right.
Yeah, I moved him out for Mbomo. So I made 2 moves with my 2 free transfers this week. It was Saka and Jota out for Mbomo and Mo Salah.
Right.
And it was those transfers for me where I was kind of like half in, half out on a game week 6 wild card. So moving Saka out means I may be a wild card to get my Arsenal guys back in. But then Mbomo, Brentford are kind of part of this fixture turn in a way where they have 2 home matches, at least in the next 2 game weeks, with West Ham and Wolves, both like West Ham catastrophic against Chelsea.
Yeah. Why don't you pull up your team, by the way, so I can take a look at it while you're.
Sure. So I'll post on the YouTube what I'm looking like here. So this is my bus team for this coming week. I've got Mbomo, Salah, Smith Rowe, and Rodgers across the midfield. Playing 4-4-2 and planning to bench João Pedro against Chelsea. And it's a lot of knee jerk. Now, if I switch back to my points for game week 5, I made one huge mistake. I finished on 64 points. Red arrow, which drops me just outside the top million, and a catastrophic mistake to bench Morgan Rodgers.
I'm just curious, like, do you? I actually didn't realize you were that he was going to end up on your bench. I mean, in some ways, it's still a pretty strong midfield, right? Because you had Smith Rowe and Mbomo who came through with 8 points apiece. But do you think that like starting Gordon, was that a faith in Gordon, or do you think you were kind of like, do you think you're as a genuine, like, as opposed to me, who I often get accused of being a fake Arsenal fan, but you are a genuine Fulham supporter. Do you think that there was like that Fulham, like it like clouded your thinking a little bit? Like, was there some kind of like, you thought like he could do something against Fulham? Because he hadn't, he'd been inconsistent, but I guess Rodgers had been too. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly it. Going into game week 5, I think benching dilemmas abounded for lots of managers because there was so much potential that was sort of unobserved. From Pedro, you saw the goal he scored against Arsenal, but apart from that, you're just sort of like, I know it's there. Morgan Rodgers is the ultimate example of this, and I just felt I was drawing upon knowledge of Gordon and Isak from last season as well. I thought that Fulham Newcastle match was probably just going to be a high scoring affair. I thought there would be goals on both sides. So I was just kind of going for where I saw the goals. Yeah. And granted, Villa at home is a strong contention. It was clearly a mistake. And I think, yeah, there's really not much more to say about it.
Whatever. This happens. I mean, almost every week, either you or me is going to do something that we, mortally regret. I mean, I'm still kicking myself for genuine coin flip between on my wild card last week between Diaz and Jota, and was kind of actually leaning Diaz, and then there was a late price change for Diaz, and I was like, fine, I'll just stick with Jota. Like, it was kind of that. It was that simple, right? Between the two of them. And that's, that's like a 20-point difference now, something like that. Yeah. So, there's no point in like kicking yourself too much, but it is, I think, just on the Rodgers thing though, he's really going to, it just feels like he is now, like he's this season's, I'm not saying he's like Cole Palmer levels of like, in terms of the kind of returns you're going to get, but if he is truly as trusted by Unai Emery as he seems to be, right? And he's a number 10 in a Villa squad with a proven ability to score goals. It seems like he gets 90 minutes every single match, right? Like he's really trusted to create chances and shoots a little bit himself. It feels like a goal is kind of inevitable, for him. He's got I guess he's only on 0.6 XG on the season, but it just feels like he might be just kind of locked in now as like a starter for the next handful of weeks. They have nice fixtures too.
So that's the big takeaway, I think, from FPL managers is Morgan Rodgers really does free up a spot in your midfield where you can make money. Like Anthony Gordon for me now gets to become like somebody like Carvalho or a sub 5 million midfielder who I can more happily bench. The trouble with the Morgan Rodgers at 5.0 is there's a guy at that price with that not that much history is always going to end up on the bubble with your benching decisions. And I think the thing that stings a lot of managers who benched Morgan Rodgers were like, yeah, I had him. I believed in him. I knew what I saw. He was so good, but I believed in all these other guys and I had to make a choice. But now going forward, it's like, I think if you have Rodgers, whether you played him or not, this is such a huge win because his price is about to go supernova. He's probably going to be, like 5.6 by the holidays. And this is great. And you have a playable fourth mid at that price. So that allows us to think about definitely being able to play Salah and Haaland in the same team. Definitely maybe being able to figure out how to get Saka plus Haaland. And if you want to try to get Salah in as well. So I think that this performance is really huge for fantasy.
So you have Gordon then went into 6. I assume on your bench then for 6.
Yeah, so moving to my bus team here for game week 6. Gordon is, of course, I just got logged out, but you can imagine, I'm going to stop sharing my team. Yes, Gordon is on the bench.
I hear your permission settings are so tight. I like,
This is always happens when we're live on YouTube. I get bombed out of our page. I'll log in next time you share the screen. But yeah, Gordon on the bench and Isak already out for Havertz. So I'm feeling good about shedding my Newcastle assets at last.
Yeah,
overdue.
just slowly.
Overdue.
Yeah, and so in terms of wildcard now, you're sort of like I basically did the. Well, I don't know. I feel reasonably set up. Like I don't think my squad's going to end up radically different than a lot of game week 6 wildcarders. I guess the real question is what I do with Salah and whether I decide it's worth turning him into Saka or not. Leaning towards not doing that. But I think it was another slightly concerning performance from Salah. Not like deeply concerning, but it's just he's so expensive and you really need super consistent big double-digit type returns to make him worth owning in fantasy, right? And
the thing with Salah, he just looks like his concentration is gone. Every time he gets the ball, and this is the last couple of weeks, he's been in good positions and he knows what to do, but he's just the balls don't feel like they're imbued with much concentration or real finesse. He's just trying to act too fast or etc. So this I guess I'm less concerned about him. I just feel like he needs to focus up a bit and we'll have more big returns on their way. I'm not thinking of getting rid of Salah at all.
Well, I'm not like super. I'm not okay. Like I feel like effectively we just got 2 blanks in a row from him. I know he got the assist in this match, but it was 2 really strong home performances, or I shouldn't say. 2 matches that look like they should be opportunities for him to get strong returns, right? The blanks in 4 gets an assist in game week 5. Really feels honestly like the second best option on that squad after Luis Diaz. And of course he's got strong returns already this season. But the problem is he costs 5 million more than Luis Diaz, right? You don't just need him to outshine Diaz a little bit. You need him to be dramatically better than Luis Diaz to be sort of, justifiably, owning him in fantasy, because I'm going into game week 6 right now without Saka, right? And kind of the only way for me to easily get Saka would be to turn Salah into Saka. I suppose the other way I could do it, slightly more complicated, would be to turn Trent into like a 4.5 million defender, and then I would have enough money to turn Jota into Saka, right? So that is a possibility. It's just, I mean, Trent feels like a great own at the moment, right? Like he feels like, and so I'm, this is the problem with the sacrifice of trying to have Salah and Saka, is that you have to give up on all the other good players, and that also means I don't have Mbomo in my squad, right? I mean, he sort of feels like I was just looking at some of the stat tables and the point projections for game week 6, and he's right up there. Like he's almost neck and neck with Salah and Saka. And Saka, I would say, is sort of the top. He's at the height of the projected points for game week 6, but it's pretty clustered, right? Like there's a bunch of options that are up there. I would say at the moment, I mean, so you don't have. It looks like you're probably almost certainly, barring an injury from Salah, not going to have Saka this weekend. So are you, it's Haaland, like for sure. Like, would you consider Havertz? Would you consider, I don't know, Mbomo for that matter? Like, was there anyone else that you'd kind of like kick around?
For me, speaking personally, no. The form that Haaland is in, and Newcastle are just not
shaky,
are very shaky. Now, Arsenal have, I guess you could say, the best fixture, if not just because they're playing at home and City and Liverpool are both away. But Arsenal's attack has not been very explosive, where certainly Liverpool's has, and not City, but Haaland's has. Yeah. So I think the case is probably easier for Salah or Diaz over Haaland, because Wolves, bad. And and just because Liverpool play away, I nobody really cares. Like they're still a phenomenal team.
That's
so
interesting.
It's another one.
I didn't even throw. It's true. I didn't even throw Salah in there. I was thinking like Arsenal just because they do play Leicester at home. I mean, Leicester have been okay. Like I don't know if I still have my little FB ref table up here. Let's see. X goals against. Let's see who the worst are. I mean, Leicester are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're fifth, like eighth from the bottom. So like they are like there are many teams that have looked worse in terms of goals, expected goals allowed. I mean, they're like a lot of usual suspects in there, like Ipswich Town, Brentford, West Ham, Southampton, Everton, and in fact, Newcastle. So like when it comes down to debating, which player do you want to captain, or, is Newcastle too much of a, I mean, because they do obviously Newcastle consistently play well at home. This has been true for them, forever, right? They're extremely good in their home matches, but and tough to play. But Man City have certainly scored plenty of goals there over the years. I am thinking of was it who is the Cancelo? I feel like didn't he have like an 18-pointer there a couple of years ago? I feel like I remember some like amazing Cancelo match a couple of years ago. He ran like as hot and cold as anybody in fantasy. But I think that I agree. Like Arsenal, I certainly think they'll beat Leicester, but I don't necessarily see that being a like 5-0 destruction. I mean, Leicester have played solid. Like they seem totally solid. Like they're gonna try to 1-1 their way towards staying up, right? Like and just hope they don't get too big of a points penalty. That's and I hope they can get enough goals. Although Mavididi actually looks pretty good. They do. It seems like they do have at least one other player that can score for them. So that's a
segue to your team. Talk about like the transfer. Did you make a transfer going into this weekend for game week 5, or do you have 2 frees going into?
No, I did, and it's kind of unfortunate. All
right, this is why I brought it up. You brought in Vardy.
Yeah, I did, and I like that you did you not know, or were you like I forgot? Like, I forgot. Okay. But I couldn't tell if you were like trying to like lead me in like a host, like, oh, what did you do this weekend, Joe?
Well, sometimes we fall backwards into wonderful segues and always cheating. Take it away.
Yeah. So finished on 70 points on the week. So honestly, feel pretty good about the results. The wild card started to kick in and help me this week, right? Yeah. I wouldn't have had Henderson without a wild card. I wouldn't have had Trent. I don't even think I would have had Rodgers, right? I think so like those 3 players alone, Henderson, Rodgers, and Trent, were worth 30 points in my squad, right? So, and obviously, like, who knows what I would have had otherwise, right? But, I think it's sort of, Vardy was, it obviously looks like a terrible transfer now because it ended up being this like super waterlogged. I don't know if you saw any of the match, right? But it was like
I didn't watch much of it.
Yeah, massive.
From goal
it was one of those, like, it was not the featured match by any means anywhere, but it was like super waterlogged pitch. It actually delayed. I'm just forgetting now if it delayed the start of the match or the start of the second half, but it was just a sloppy match, right? And those matches, there's always that dream that it's going to turn into like an insane, like something crazy is going to happen.
Goals start flying in because no one can really play controlled football.
Exactly. But usually it's the opposite, right? Yeah. And it just ends up being a slog where the ball's just sloshing around midfield. And so I don't know that it was too representative of what you might get from Calvert-Lewin or from Vardy from that match. And I abandoned my boy. I should have just got Chris Wood, right? Who was
right there.
He was right there. And honestly, that is maybe the one. And again, I'm not. I feel pretty good about. The season's going fine. Decisions are fine. But I did talk myself into Johan Vissa on my wild card, and him getting injured was just a real bummer because I had a real kind of cascading effect, right? Because it sort of messed up my planned transfers, and then I obviously didn't have him for for game week 5 either, and it would have been nice to start him for that one. So so I brought in Vardy just because I was really debating between Vardy, Calvert-Lewin, holding my transfer, or Chris Wood. And, part of the reason why I ended up bringing in Vardy was because I really liked my squad for game week 6. And it was very easy for me to bench Vardy, and I can share my squad later. But I felt like I had a strong squad for 6, and so I was like, well, let me just because I was reading a little bit about the Everton squad going into game week 6, right? And there's just so many, there's injuries and illness and a lot of question marks, and so it's just this thought. Well, Leicester haven't won so far this season. Vardy has scored a couple of goals. Everton have been terrible defensively on the season so far, right? And so it's just sort of all of these reasons. I was like, well, I'm just going to attack the fixture in front of me. And it's sort of a strategy I've had going into this season, which is I don't kind of want to play the 3-week, 4-week game so much. And I felt like last year I was sort of giving up the points in front of me in order to have more points in theory 3 weeks from now or whatever, right? It was like everything was sort of like a calculated, do this to do this, do this. And I was like, I just want to attack game week 5 with my transfer. And so, and so that's how it ended up. It was a blank, but I'm not hugely concerned about him. He's a very consistent forward, and I don't need to start him all the time. I'd say an area of concern for me is actually Eze. And I thought it was an interesting match, the Crystal Palace Man United match. Yeah. It was sort of really, for Bruno, for people who still have Bruno, I don't know. It's like, why are they torturing themselves, right? But he's sort of just so frustrating.
Get out while you still can. My God, the call is coming from inside the house.
Exactly.
It's already. I thought Crystal Palace looked like absolutely hopeless the first 20 minutes or so.
Oh, totally.
They found their feet at some point.
9 points from Henderson's they were better in the second half. I mean, 9 points from Henderson's a miracle when you consider the double, the double post, and the Garnacho and Bruno. And so, but the problem with Eze, as I sort of, maybe it was the first time I'd sat down and watched the full 90 minutes of a Palace match so far this season, is he has been absolutely targeted as the one player relied on to make decisions on the ball, right? And so there was a moment, it was maybe in the 50th or 60th minute of that match where, he had the ball in an attacking position and he was instantly surrounded by literally five Man United players surrounded him on the ball, right? It was, and this is not like, they were not pressing, right? This was just literally we dare you to pass this to anybody, literally anybody that isn't you, right? And so he just has no space on the ball. And so that means when he gets the faintest glimmer of a chance, he's just ripping it as hard as he can. He's not even aiming, right? And that's why he ended up missing a couple of chances in that match, is because he has no time on the ball to make a decision. He actually did have a little bit of time in the first half on a chance, and that was maybe the one where he was just feeling harried and rushed it
just wide, didn't he?
Well, that was why. That was the second half. In the first half, he hit one right at Onana when he could have actually taken a touch. But regardless, so he feels like not urgent because he's a quality player, and I think he's fine long term. But I don't see him being in my squad for long, and I feel like I have run into a problem that is a real trap that I think you have to be very careful to avoid, and I have not avoided it, which is don't have too many players from crap teams in your fantasy team. And I look at my squad right now, and not necessarily crap, but just mid-table or below, right? João Pedro, Jamie Vardy, Antoine Semenyo, Eze, who else? I mean, Anthony Robinson, sorry to say, right? There's just, there's a lot of kind of the problem with these having players in these squads is they're inconsistent, right? Unless they have a very, very clear identity, right? Everton under Deitch near the end of last season were okay, their identity is we're going to 1-0 you to death. Right. We've got the guys, especially when Branthwaite was healthy, right? And we're just going to shut it down. And it was very effective. It kept them up. Right. But I think right now, even Robinson, who's been a pretty good fantasy asset so far this season, but it feels like Fulham are kind of going into a little bit more of an attacking mode. And, and so I don't know.
They're just a well-rounded sort of, tactical side, which means that's always kind of going to sacrifice one or the other depending on the game state. So the better Fulham get inherently the worse their defense is going to get.
Right. Yeah. And I also think because they're actually getting some pretty good wing play right now, it makes Robinson less, although I think he has 2 assists already in the season. So no huge complaints there, but it maybe makes him less relevant as a kind of attacking fantasy asset. So again, it's fine to have him, but it's just like I feel like I have too many players that I don't really trust week in and week out for my squad. And I think that's something I just have to give a little thought to. And I think for wildcarders going into game week 6, that is one thing I would keep in mind is basically like do like a kind of 10,000 foot, pretend you're like a business consultant or something, right? And just like look at your squad and be like, wait a minute, do I have 6 starters on my team that are on squads that are 10th place or below? Right. And if so, maybe consider making a handful of changes, right? Because the thing about someone like Morgan Rogers, right, is Morgan Rogers is on we talked about this earlier, but I'm just going to try to tie these together, right? Morgan Rogers is on a really good team. Really good teams are going to continue to create chances all the way to the end of the match and find ways to score and win, right? Like, I'm not sure you can even say that about Crystal Palace, right? Like, they're sort of, who knows? Like maybe they'll find one goal like through a lot of struggle in a match, right? Like it's not, it's not going to be easy. And so it's, so I think that is something to sort of keep in mind. Maybe I'm just trading one problem for another with Brentford if I go to Eze, but in Bomo, like as I do in Bomo, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I do. Maybe I do trust Brentford a little bit more just because same manager in charge, same basic kind of squad in place.
The other way to look at it is less a team-centric sort of a thing, which is like came up with are you going to go for Calvert-Lewin this game week? Well, Everton stink. Well, it doesn't matter if they stink or not. Do their players get points?
Yep.
And it's less, do you have too many players from stinky teams? And it's more like, do you have actual players who get fantasy returns?
Yeah.
And typically, the worse the team, the fewer fantasy returns. Definitely not getting clean sheets and fewer goals. And there is something about Mbomo in particular, and that was the appeal of Eze at the start of the season. Is it doesn't matter how good or bad Crystal Palace are, Eze will find his way.
Yeah,
that is, you got Semenyo as well. It doesn't matter if Bournemouth are having a good or a bad game. Semenyo is kind of always there.
That's true.
But you just run a higher risk fantasy team there. This is why Mo Salah ultimately never leaves anybody's team because it's such low risk.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Although, and again, it's fine to have some of them. You kind of have to, right? Because the players get more expensive in the better teams. But I think it's just and like for example, like Semenyo ended up coming into my squad, but he was on the bench, right? He was first bench and he came on for Jota. Right. And I think the problem is when you have so many of these options that you kind of have no choice. But you can only bench 3 players. Right. And so inevitably you end up having to start some of these players. Like, I'm not sure, like I would have started João Pedro, for example. Right. But it was sort of, I think that was actually part of the reason why I ended up having to make the Vardy move and didn't hold my transfers. There were just a few too many doubts, like had to be a little bit of mild doubt around Jota, just because he did start at midweek. Not enough for me to drop him, although I think you were very smart to do it. And obviously it worked out, moving him from Bomo. And I suppose even Salah worked out, right? That was a net.
Saka over Salah. It's a difference of 2 points.
2 points, but still.
So I think it is a difference ultimately of 1 point. Because if I held Saka, I would have started him, but captained Haaland and the 9-point captaincy.
Okay.
So you got to do a little adding and subtracting there, whatever math you were doing at the start of the podcast.
I'm impressed that it sounds like you clearly have done. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Minus, could you not? Everyone's doing this math.
All right. Let me see if I've got, we should move on here. I wanted to make sure I covered, so let's move on, Brandon. Let's do the top 10 in the Always Cheating Super League. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I love that.
All right, let's do it. I will. We'll shout out our friends at FPL Game Week. Again, this is a free plug. Okay, we're willing to do free plugs on here, Brandon. We're nice. We're nice guys. Certainly, I'm a nice guy, and happy to do it.
We're part of the community.
It is, the hub, the hub Game Week. We're part of a lot of communities, Brandon.
Sure,
we're community minded. We're community organizers. Like Obama.
Obama. There you go.
All right, so this is what, if you've never been to FPL Game Week, this is for anyone watching. If you're listening, I'm just pulling up the screen with the top 10 for the Super League. So we have a tie in 10th. We actually have a 4-way tie in 10th, Brandon. Yeah. And we've got Lijesh Arangal, Martin Vuletic, Cyprian Negru, and Zeman Zakari, all tied for 10th. In 9th is Doug Gorman. I like that. We had 4 names that were not Doug Gorman. It's really
shout out to Doug.
Shout out to Doug Gorman. In 8th is Nils. Now that we've reset again, Nils Arv Nordbo in 8th, Kevin Maturi in 7th, Liam Buckley in 5th, Tor Charlesworth, and that's a good name, Tor Charlesworth, and also in 5th. In 4th, we have Marcus Begverst. In 3rd is Binod Archiara. In 2nd is Sundar Chemjong, and in 1st is PB. And Brandon, PB is a change name. Do you remember when you were a change name for a year? Because change name means that they have they disapproved of your name, and they have removed it from the game. And so if you ever see anyone with the name change name, that means that they've been they've been shadow banned or whatever from
I got changed named during the COVID season because my team name was Cure for COVID. And I was just trying to put out some positive vibes. But apparently COVID was a keyword there. And I got shadow banned.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm sure that's what your goal was to be. You were community minded then too. You were part of the
always.
You hated COVID and you wanted to stop it.
All right. Well, we're doing a little housekeeping. Quick shout out to our Patreon. If you like what you hear, you want to say thanks and get a little more fantasy content in return, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/always cheating, and there are multiple levels of support there. You get access to our Discord chat, which was absolutely pumping live during the matches. Always enjoyed chatting with our friends during the matches, and lots of rate my teams and advice there, and an extra podcast every week. We release Thursday nights close to the game week deadline. Looking forward to that one this week, Thursday night. And we've got lots of mini leagues and all sorts of stuff. So always patreon.com/always cheating. I really can't get that out. And also just want everyone to check out the show notes. $500 gift cards being given away by our Blue Wire Network, our family over there. Just complete a quick survey for your chance to get a $500 gift card. Link is in the show notes.
Excellent. All right. And wait, did you read off the new patrons, Brandon?
New patrons, of course. We welcome. Where are they here? In the you read them off. I can't find them in the order.
Yep, it says new patrons right there. I don't know if you had your bifocals on for this pod or not, but
I can't read.
We have a new producer this time around, Brandon. Craig at Total Maths Tutoring. And I like this. That's the name he put down. And I assume there's a little bit of a plug there. But Brandon, we plugged FPL merch for many, many years. So told him, let's do it.
Great workaround.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody wins as far as I'm concerned. It feels like a totally fair way to do it. If you want to become a producer patron and toss it has to be like less than 5 words, but like if you he's right at the 5
we're not going to do like a 30-second ad read when we read the producer credits.
Well, exactly. But Craig did it right. So Craig at Dental Has Tutoring is our newest producer. Thank you, Craig. And then we also have two other patrons this week. A nice little jump, Brandon. Nice and slow and steady, right? Once the season starts, you don't get those huge plugs, but it's a great reminder that you can do it. And we, well, let me read them off first. Jonathan Nilsson and Stephen Brown. Thank you to Nilsson and Brown. Not Nilsson Sings Newman, Brandon. That is a great album, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So, but a reminder, we'll be doing our kit contest soon. I'm so excited to do that kit contest, Brandon. We may not wait till the second half. We may turn that into a.
We had one of our supporters actually went to a Dulwich Hamlet game.
That's right.
Live, inspired by the kits that we gave away to our winner last.
Oh, were they inspired because of the kit? That's amazing.
I don't know if it was completely because of that.
I think we should take full credit. Let's assume that they were inspired by the kit and that we.
Mike. Shout out to Michael who saw a 5-2 victory for the Dulwich Hamleters.
Love it. Fantastic. And are you pronouncing that correctly? If not, we'll soon find out. Yeah. All right, Brandon. Well, let's move on to game week 6. I know we covered game week 6 pretty extensively already in the start here, but a lot of people are on wildcard, and I think there are some interesting, questions about what to do if you're on a wild card. And so I've got a couple wild card questions I'm gonna read off, and then I think we should take a look at the upcoming fixtures, right? Because when you're on a wild card, the mistake you can make is one of the mistakes you can make. You can make many mistakes, Brandon. You could bring in Jota over Luis Diaz, for example. But one of the mistakes you can make is to have a team that you just love for the game week in front of you, and then you haven't quite thought about all of the game weeks that follow over the next 5 weeks or so. So you can go to a place like our friends at the Hub, and you can take a look at the fixture ticker going several weeks ahead. But just to kick things off here, ICX Believer asked, on a wild card, which players are essential? Can you rank them in order of importance? It's an interesting way to think about it. So I think we can name some important players. And then Scully asked about 4.5 defenders if we're wild carding this week. Okay, so now I want to cast our minds, Brandon, ahead to game weeks 6 through 10, and I think you and I should walk through them a little bit together. Okay. So I will share just so we're reading off the same prayer book, Brandon, as you like to say. That's why I know it's one of your kind of famous expressions, and so I'm sorry for stealing it here.
Big prayer book guy for sure.
Big prayer book guy for sure. Yeah. You also like to get down to brass tacks. I know that's another big one for you.
I'm a big corkboard guy.
Big corkboard guy. Isn't that a chair thing? I thought isn't brass tacks that like you've stripped the chair of its
probably
of its covering and you're down to the brass. I think that's what it is. All right, so we've got a look at fixtures up ahead. These are sorted roughly by fixture strength. So one thing that's interesting actually is we see Brentford at the top of this chart, and this is, again, you can find this on the Hub, but Brentford's at the top of the chart. But Brandon, you remember when I pulled up our good friend, the FB ref X goals allowed chart, referenced that I don't think I've ever referenced in this pod, and I've referenced it 3 times in one episode. But Brentford have a handful of very strong home fixtures over the next few weeks. They do, however, have the second worst X goal allowed on the season. Just Ipswich Town have just barely nicked them by 0.1. And granted, there was a away match to Man City there, but that was only a 2-1, and they actually they played reasonably well in that match. So you probably don't want to get too into like defensive metrics after 5 weeks, right? It might tell the wrong story because some teams have played much harder teams than others, but regardless, we have not seen, and as somebody who owned Fleck in the first 3 weeks of the season, I have not been impressed by the Brentford defense. And just on that, thinking about the question about 4.5 million defenders, I mean, would you consider any Brentford player, like any non-Mbomo Brentford options for your team? I guess I'll even include Kevin Shaw, the off the bench option this week. Kevin Shaw.
There are no defensive assets, including Flecken, that would appeal to me. Chelsea was somewhere in your running order notes, and Robert Sanchez at 4.6 is secretly owning all of us. He was in the last 2 weeks, 10 points and 15 points. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous at 4.6. I think some people were worried about what's the goalkeeper rotation going to be like there.
Classic Chelsea problem because I think they have 4 goalkeepers right now on their squad. Yeah.
So I just think there are too many options to consider over Brentford, but then you get to Ipswich immediately below them in the Hub's fixture ticker with defensive fixtures, and Greaves at 4.0. I cannot believe Greaves hasn't gone up in price at all at the start of the season. He's played every minute at 4.0. He's decent at on corner kicks if you are hunting for attacking returns. Will you ever play Greaves? If you are ever going to play an Ipswich asset, I guess it is at this time, like their upcoming fixtures. It's Villa at home, followed by West Ham, Everton, Brentford, Leicester, until it kind of gets a little dicier with Spurs and United in game weeks 11 and 12.
Everton 8 and Leicester 10 are both reasonable moments where you could do it for certainly. I think I brought in Greaves myself on a wild card, and I feel pretty happy, but I'd rather have him over Wout Faes, who I think is maybe the other kind of close 4 million option that you might consider.
It's the fullbacks at Nottingham Forest. I think if you're also then looking at like Aina and Moreno, I think are both good options. Forest, where are Forest in the FB ref stats. I've got to know, because just looking at their fixtures coming up, it is pretty compelling just by that metric alone. Fulham at home, Chelsea, Palace, Leicester, and West Ham in the next 5.
Yeah, Brandon, they are at 3.
Good.
I mean, three total goals through 5 matches. They are second to Man City in terms of X goal odds. Really impressive. Yeah, and they're probably, you're right. You did talk about Aina on last week's pod, and so I'll I think we have been on the Aina train for two full weeks now.
Choo-choo, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that I think that Forest, they might be a kind of Brentfordy team this season, right? Or a team that has some like proper FPL potential. Do you think the Gibbs White? I mean, he's only out for 1 week, so it's not that big of a deal. But it's losing him is certainly going to be a problem for a week. Although actually, it may not even matter. I can't remember if they have a League Cup match at midweek. He may not even miss a single week.
I'll pull up the EFL Cup fixtures because I wonder if they did play last week. Tomorrow, Tuesday, who's playing in the EFL Cup? Chelsea, Newcastle, City, Leicester, and Villa all play on Tuesday. Arsenal and West Ham and Liverpool play on Wednesday. So Forest, no fixture between now and
looks
the weekend.
Yeah, so he's going to miss that Fulham match in game week 6, which is, unfortunate for them, because I think that could have been a good fixture. It's probably great news for Anthony Robinson owners who want to start him that week. I saw he was in your bus team squad, Brandon. So
yes.
I do think that he's really the kind of straw that stirs the drink for us. So, but yeah, I think there's Aina. I'd say especially Aina, right? Let's just leave it at that. We don't need to drill down into all the other 4.5 million options. Their squad in general is not as chaotic. They really had a kind of Chelsea thing a couple of years ago where there were like 40 people in their squad, but it's thinned out a little in the last couple of years. So yeah, let's just sticking on the cheap. I didn't necessarily plan to start here, Brandon, but let's do it while we're now here on the cheap defender route. I think I would certainly be looking at Konsa, right? He's still extremely cheap. He's a starting defender for one of the best teams in the Premier League. I'll go so far as to say that about Aston Villa. I believe that to be true. Do you want to know where they are? Yeah, FB Ref. They are the 6th best defense so far in the season. So very, so strong defensively as well. Hasn't necessarily been borne out in terms of clean sheets, but I think that's a little. That stuff is a little fluky this early on in the season. I think he's definitely worth owning. Do you agree with me on the concept there?
Oh, far and away. I was kind of like tinkering with the idea of Pau Torres being an interesting differential, but I think just leaving that to talk, not talking about that anymore is probably the best idea.
So, all right. So I think that's enough cheapy defenders for us to talk about. I think there's 2 clubs I want to talk about on the wild card. I think, just because to me, there's not much of a debate about Haaland between you and me. I know some people
have to have him.
Yeah, I feel like you have to have him too. He's just too good, and
he's also fun to have, and I won't hear otherwise.
He is fun to have. Yeah, it's true. And honestly, we've already seen there are multiple times where you can, although this week maybe prove you should just always captain him, honestly, because he's outscored Salah. The last 2 weeks there was a debate, and both weeks he's outscored him. But I do think that I think the question is what to do with Liverpool, and then how heavy do you want to go on Arsenal? Now, we did talk earlier on in the pod about it sort of comes down to the kind of team that you want to have, right? Like, and I don't want to do the goalkeeper thing, but I do think that if I were wildcarding, I would have 3 Arsenal players. I would find a way to get 3 Arsenal players in whatever combination I can make it work, right? I would probably, like you, have 2 defenders and Saka, but I do think that it's also fine to have like Havertz, Saka, and Gabriel. Like, I think that's a really strong trio as well, because it does feel like when they're like the Man City match, you can almost just write off, right? For multiple reasons. Not just
Are you suggesting Saliba is off the table for people wildcarding?
I just prefer. I mean, do you think
if you double
I just
up,
feel like
okay, here's the question I really want to ask. Double up on defense. Who are the 2 guys? Gabriel plus who?
Yeah, plus Saliba. Those are the 2 that I would have.
Gotcha.
But I guess I was just thinking, like, if you were going like through the middle or whatever, like, just like I do think that Gabriel, I was maybe slightly worried about his starting risk going into the season because of Calafiore. I just worried that there's a chance that there might be a little bit of, just like we saw last season, a little bit of rotation on the left side. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen with Gabriel. He's obviously off to an amazing start on the season.
Almost reliant upon this man.
Yeah, almost reliant on him. And I think, if you see them both as equally reliable starters, he and Saliba, I do think that Gabriel's superior goal threat is the tiebreaker. And I mean, like, if you were wildcarding right now, would you stick with Saliba or would you move to Gabriel?
I would get Gabriel for sure. I support that argument wholeheartedly. Rotation concerns are well in the past.
Well past it. Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I'm just glad he scored when they played Man City. So a lot of people had him bench. That's like the only saving grace, not as a non-owner. But I think with Liverpool, it is tricky because Salah is probably fine, but I guess where I would come, because it's just it's easy to be like, oh yeah, you can't drop X player, you can't drop Y player. And suddenly it's like, well, how am I going to fund these other players? Right. It's like, oh, you've got to have 3 Arsenal, but you can't drop any of these 8, right? Like it gets a little tricky, but I think if I had Luis Diaz, he would not be going anywhere in my squad. He's just playing too well. And I think that, I don't think their fixtures are so tough that he has to go, right? Like they have Wolves away, Palace away, Chelsea at home in their next 3. Like that's not a great trio of fixtures, but it's not like horrific, right? I mean, Wolves is a good fixture. Crystal Palace is like, I don't even really know. It's like a middle of the road fixture, right? It's certainly not bad. And then Chelsea at home. If they were at Chelsea, maybe that's trickier, but I think for a home match at Anfield, I actually think it's fine. I think that they'll score a couple of goals in that one. Arsenal away is the one match that I would ideally not have a bunch of Liverpool assets for, but that's 4 weeks away. I'm just not super worried about that at the moment. Pretty easy to move these players around for that fixture. So I have Trent. He has been really attacking. I don't have like a heat map pulled up or anything like that, but I thought he was super involved in the attack in the Bournemouth match. Obviously, created an assist. Even defensively, he's been fine. He's not nearly as shaky as he was last season. And so if you had, either way, if you had Trent, would you drop him on a wild card? If you didn't have Trent, would you look at bringing him in on a wild card?
This is a really hard question.
Yeah.
Because I think of all the players, even comparing him to Haaland and Salah, he's the hardest one to work out budgetarily.
Yeah.
Just because of how you kind of put the money into the various positions of the team. I feel like the ceiling is so high with Trent, as evidenced by this weekend.
Yeah.
It's like the upside is so good. And so to compare Trent to Robertson, I don't think you can at this point.
Right.
There is no comparison. You should have Trent.
I agree with that.
So then I think you get into other comparisons where I think maybe you can free up your team a little bit to have Trent. Is Salah versus Luis Diaz is, I think, a very apt comparison given current evidence. Then you've got Havertz versus Saka. It's a similar comparison to Salah versus Diaz. Saka is now the Morgan Gibbs-White of Arsenal. He's only going to get points through corner kicks and penalties. It's so odd to me.
I know. He's he feels very peripheral. And I do think, you mentioned this, I think you maybe did it on either our Patreon pod or on Discord, but just something about, that's right. I actually read your Discord comments, Brandon. I just, when I see them, I'm not search. I'm not control Fing, to define them.
Got a Google alert. Sure.
Yeah. But, I do think that, the loss of, Odegaard for however long he's out for does ding, I think, Saka a little bit as a fantasy asset because it just requires him to do a lot, right? A lot, arguably has more defensive responsibilities. It's just, there's a lot more burden on him to create. It's exhausting.
Right. So the point of all of that is to say, I think there are many routes to just painlessly having Trent as well as Liverpool and Arsenal coverage, so to speak. So I would definitely have him. Where I am at not wild carding, I guess I'm convincing myself that Trent is not a priority.
He's one of the
you're going to get burned week to week like we did, like I did this week.
I don't think he's you're right. I mean, his ceiling is super high, and that's it's like a real I would definitely consider it. I would try to make it work, right? Yeah. Like tinker with your squad and see if you can, make it work. I mean, because the problem is he's one of the only good defenders. Like in terms of players you'd actually want in your squad, we talked about Arsenal defenders, but if you have Trent and one Arsenal defender, you're basically done.
You're done. There's no Pedro Porro for you at that point.
No, you don't.
And
I
don't even Porro, think what do you need Pedro Porro for right now? He's kind of at a kind of a strong-ish start, and now he's gone, like disappeared from the face of the earth.
Takes a lot of shots, but they're just not keeping any clean sheets, right? And it's hard to have a lot of faith that they will start doing that. Just looking at the top point scorers in the season, we do probably have to start thinking a little bit about Man United's defense, which does look quite a lot stronger. I thought defensively they were pretty good in the Crystal Palace match on Saturday. I thought they really didn't give Palace a lot of space to breathe at all.
If you just look at the top scoring defenders in the game, and this is not a statistical analysis, but
sure,
it's Liverpool and Manchester United guys, and then Gabriel is in the mix there.
Yeah,
Dalot and Mazraoui are. And then De Ligt, of course, and I think De Ligt might be the pick because he is the Gabriel of Manchester United in terms of
and it's impressive for him because he got 9 minutes and 11 minutes in the first two matches for Brighton, and he's still wherever he is, 8th on the points list. So it feels like they've maybe attacking wise you wonder how much it's ever going to improve, under Ten Hag. But it does seem like defensively maybe I'm going too far there. Like they just have to things have to shake out better up front. Like there's something, it's like too many players for too many slots or something. And Marcus Rashford, is he in? Is he out? It feels like they need to they need to be like kind of ruthless Alex Ferguson style, right? And just start dropping some players as they age out, right?
The attack is a mess. I wonder if it's just Bruno's time has possibly passed. They need to go find a talismanic attacker to then build around, because right now it's just a bunch of what feels like mercenaries there trying to earn their place in the team.
Exactly. It's not in like, it's Rashford scores a goal and then there was so much drama. I mean, maybe this is because I was watching the American coverage, right? And American coverage of all sports is very star focused, right? But it's like Rashford benched, it's such a huge no Rashford. It's like, well, he's been terrible for a year. Yeah, exactly. Like he did score last week, but in general, it does feel like they need to reset. But of course, I am trying to say something nice about Man United, and I immediately get sucked back into the negative. But I do think that it is a shame. I just can't help myself. But I think that defensively, it's again, when you're looking at defense, if you're especially if you're wild carding, I think you've got to look like you got to cast a pretty long lens, right? You got to think 10, 15 weeks ahead. Because you just, especially when it comes to cheap defenders, you just do not want to spend your transfers moving these 4.5 million guys back and forth. It's a real waste of a transfer, right? They're not super consistent. So even though their next handful of fixtures aren't spectacular, I do think that grabbing one of the cheaper, you could go Dalot if you want, but I honestly think you could just get one of the 4.5 guys or I guess 4.6, and then you feel comfortable benching them too, right? Like sometimes there's something about the price. It's like you talked about like Gordon earlier. Like sometimes it's almost better to put yourself in a position where you are okay not starting this player, right? And sometimes when they get too expensive, there's some part of you that's like, well, they're expensive for a reason. They have historical performance, right? But you're like, how much? What's the difference really between these guys? I mean, is Dalot such an amazing attacking player that you just absolutely need to have him over a 4.5 guy? I don't think so either. Yeah. So Yeah. So, okay. So we've, we talked a lot about the defense. I do think that Mboma would have to be one of the first players that you brought in a wild card.
Genuinely. Yes.
Yeah. And I will say for myself, I am leaning towards bypassing the Saka move and just straight up going Jota to Mboma, which feels like
seems very sensible.
Yeah, pretty clean and easy. I mean, the thing is, Liverpool do play at midweek. Jota's going to start that match now for sure, right? Like 100%. And then they have a Champions League match the following week, right? So we could be in yet another position. This happens all the time, and it's like you don't quite want it to be true, but like
you're in the Phil Foden zone.
Exactly, where it's like he starts in midweek, benched on the weekend. Because, like, I mean, these managers aren't playing fantasy, right? Like, they don't care. Like, this stuff doesn't matter to them. All they see are 3 fixtures ahead, right? Yeah. Like, there's a fixture on Wednesday, Saturday, and or whatever it is, right? And so it's like that's how they have to manage. And so it makes logical sense not to start Jota at the weekend, or at the very least, not give him more than 50 to 55 to 65 minutes. So I think that, it's a really easy move. The only thing that's kind of annoying is if I hadn't made the Vardy move, I could have possibly done Trent. Again, I know I talked about this at the top of the pot, but I could have just had Salah and Saka. And moving Salah out is just never a fun move, right? Like that, like you said before, it's just it's a little tricky. So yeah, but Mboma looks fantastic. He's going to be effectively the Mboma we got last season, right? Like a player who's going to be relied on to score and create chances for Brentford in lieu of kind of anybody else who's able to do it.
Yeah, totally. There's some just teams I feel like you should be mindful of to possibly avoid. And I don't think this is rocket science here, but I've kind of said my piece on Newcastle. If you're on wild card, I think Newcastle, they do have City in game week 6. So, it's right there in front of you. But then it's Everton, fine. But then Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal in a row. Chelsea, who knows who you're going to get week to week. But I feel like Chelsea is sort of growing in esteem as just like maybe it's a wild card fixture, but it's not going to be a gimme for any team. So I really don't like Newcastle's upcoming run. Spurs with Manchester United, Brighton, West Ham Palace, Villa. I feel like any shine that Spurs had, it's like they're just not in good form.
Get rid of them all. You didn't want any of them. Like, even, I mean, Madison is having one of his like periodic bouts of playing well, but it's like I don't want him. And Son is fine. I mean, Son is an amazing player. I'm not going to neg him on the pot at all, but like he's just he's just too expensive and too inconsistent for fantasy at this point.
What about Brighton though? So Brighton's upcoming fixtures in this turn, it's Chelsea away, followed by Spurs, Newcastle, Wolves, and then it's really diabolical in game weeks 10 and 11 with Liverpool and City back to back. A lot of people will be smarting from following all of Hurstler's press conferences to figure out what to do with João Pedro, and we end up with a 1-pointer from him.
1-pointer across 2 fixtures, really, right? If you look at,
and they do have some affordable, like Veltman and Dunk have had moments at the start of the season, and they're quite cheap, but I don't see them rising to the point at which I want to buy them. I mean, what are you planning with João Pedro on your team?
Yeah, I'm I'm a little on the fence about what to do there. I'm actually planning to start him this week. I have 3 players, and I haven't decided what to do with any of them yet in terms of who I want to start. I have João Pedro, Jamie Vardy, and Anthony Robinson, and I think they're all in the conversation. Again, I'm just like kicking myself for not getting Chris Wood. By the way, on a wild card, I would go Wood over DCL and Vardy. Possibly even João Pedro. I would say that, and I think again it comes down to like the quality of the squad a little bit, and it just feels like I just think again they'll be without Gibbs White for 1 week, but I just in general I feel like I trust Forest to be a better kind of consistent squad, and I think that will probably lead to more chances for Chris Wood, and so that's why I would favor him.
And I mean, Pedro's ankle did get destroyed by Gibbs White, maybe he got the ball. Who cares? He destroyed that poor young Brazilian man.
Yeah, like a kind of scissor tackle. It was, that one I wasn't. I'm not going to go on about what they did with
I don't know what
Trossard,
coming off of some niggling injuries. I don't know what João Pedro's status is going to be throughout this week. It's probably going to be another nightmare thing. He was kind of limping around though.
He was, but he was okay. Like he was like, I felt like he was running and stuff. I watched the the last 10 minutes of that game. He was really he was moving around, but. I hear you. Okay, so I think that's, what else is there anything else we want to cover on the kind of wild card discussion? I mean, I think a lot of it we talked about, like, I think in some ways it kind of picks itself. Like, and obviously like it picks itself, and then everybody will have opinions about Raya versus, like, I think you could go with Chelsea's keeper, right? Like there's like, there's spots where you could, a reasonable person could debate, but I think, Morgan Rogers, I would go Saka on a wild card. Two other Arsenal players, probably, certainly Haaland. I would probably have Chris Wood as a third forward. Maybe you have Havertz, depending on the kind of team structure you want there. Mbomo. We talked about a bunch of 4.5 million midfielders. I mean, you don't need to listen to any of their pods this week. Like, you're done. Yeah, it's completely done, and we've solved. Over. That's a wrap. We've solved all questions, which I feel great about. So let's end with one final question here, Brandon. This is from MJ, friend of the. Well, I think MJ is actually one of the mods on our Discord, Brandon. So MJ asks, who is the most overpriced player so far? Who's the most overpriced player this season?
I want to say Cole Palmer. I still think that Cole Palmer coming out of well taken goal. Nico Jackson, who we haven't mentioned, like looked composed for the first time in his Chelsea career.
We should be talking more about him. He's been great. I mean, the thing about Palmer though, he is on 2 goals and 4 assists in the season. So I mean, he's been pretty solid.
I just think it's too much to pay. I mean, Morgan Rogers. If you look at the word cloud of FPL, Morgan Rogers' name might be bigger than Cole Palmer's right now. So I don't understand why you're going to pay 10.5 for this guy.
Well, he's not that expensive, but how about Isak at 8.4 million now? He's in that territory, I think, in terms of
certainly, it certainly hasn't earned his price.
Oh, okay. Actually, I've got a good one. How about Gvardiol?
Yeah.
I mean,
what a disaster this Man City defense is.
Oh, I mean, he has a 1-1-2-2 in his last 4 matches. 6 million. I mean, honestly, you could put the entire defense in there. We'll give Ederson a little bit of a break because he did pick up an assist last week. But in general, there is nobody that you would want from their defense, and there's nobody. I think it's crazy on a wild card that they're, I think, clearly the best team in the Premier League. And like, sorry, Arsenal again, like until you snatch a title from them, the title is Man City's. But from a fantasy perspective, I just don't know who else you could even consider besides Haaland. Like literally a single player from defense all the way through the midfield. Is there a single? Can you even try to put up an argument for somebody? I mean, I guess like Phil Foden at 9.3 million might be the most expensive. He has 1 point in the season.
Yeah, he's overpriced for sure, given how it's gone. I mean, we're naming some players who are properly priced when put in the right moment in time, of course. For sure. Yes. But it was so funny that the goal that Haaland scored against Arsenal today, it was just incredibly naive line and center back play from Saliba and Gabriel. But then it was like, to your point, you don't even see where that ball comes from to Haaland. It just is there, and I'm like, who even got the assist? Because I'm like, it's just a bunch of faceless FIFA guys. And City, as far as I'm concerned,
it is. Who did get the assist on that?
Savinho.
Oh, it's Savinho. Okay, yeah, or Savio,
or Savio. Yeah, that guy.
I guess he's the closest to an option. He has 3 assists on the season, but nobody. There's nobody worth owning outside of Erling Haaland, who is an absolute monster. He's 10 goals in the season.
Outrageous.
Don't drop him. Do not drop him on a wild card. I know some people are going to try to like find a way. They're going to look at their squad and be like, oh, I can do all these things. But it's if you weren't going to drop, like if you were going to drop him a couple of weeks ago, would have been the time to try to gamble and do it. I mean, after the Newcastle match, you're going to captain him for at least the next 6 weeks, right? Fulham home, Wolves away, Southampton home, Bournemouth away, Brighton away, Spurs home. I don't know. I mean, like maybe like Salah has like an Ipswich match in there or something, but it looks like you're going to be just Captain Haaland every single week.
There's like a scene in Memento in which Guy Pearce's character pulls out like a Polaroid from his car's glove box, and it's a picture of, I don't know, some fantasy content creator, and he says, "Don't get Haaland," and on the back of the Polaroid it just says, "Do not trust this person."
Do not trust this man. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think that's good for now. We have a Patreon pod that we'll do at midweek where we'll have some news and inevitably injury updates and things like that to cover. So join us then. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. We'll kick off some kind of contest for our Patreon supporters soon. We every year we try to do something new, and we often come up with these overly elaborate contest ideas that make no sense. And yet, weirdly, it was the most overly elaborate of all, Brandon, the Premier League, non-Premier League hit contest. Yeah. That was the biggest hit I think we've ever done, unless you count the last cheater standing, which we can't even get credit for because we didn't start it.
R.I.P. Dave, who got bounced this weekend from OCS.
Yeah. But anyway, if you want to, it's a fun group. And if you're looking for people who are friendly and fun, go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support us. Every pledge level gets access to the Discord. And then at the kind of second tier and above, you get access to the extra podcast each week. Brendan, do you want to thank our producer patrons?
Yes. Big thanks as always to producers Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, Dave Wagner, Lodahl, our buddy Chris Howell, Andy Penn, Nick Wright, Lazarus Yanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Babas Kuhn, Ron Frost, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons, Terrence O'Donnell, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, as he does it, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Craig Jackson, Caleb Robbie, Brian Clark, Thomas Tislaw, Fred Jacobson, The Saint, Gareth H., Shalin F. Kadakia, Risha Nigam, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Matthew Skinner, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, Rune Sandberg, the three Jims, James Murray Wood, James C., and James Holland. Also Jack and our newest producer, Craig at Total Maths Tutoring. Craig, I want to know if you have a numerology course that I can take because I need to brush up on that.
That's true.
Check
Sharpen things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Review, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and share the pod. That really does help us a lot. Follow us wherever you get social media. And for all this information and more, go to alwayscheating.com.
All right. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.